In this pre-lab, we prepare to ask the most heinous question a high achiever can be asked. Are you actually working hard? Today's pre-lab prepares us for next week's full lab, but today we introduced and test the hypothesis associated with hard work, that 10,000 hours of practice makes you an expert. Spoiler alert, it doesn't, but please stay till the very end because we are going to revise this hypothesis in our experiment, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but I'm going to rock your world with this hypothesis revision. Welcome back to the Anatomy of Achievement. I'm Kiara, psychology graduate and head scientist of this lab. I read a quote that said, "Being busy doesn't equate to hard work." And I immediately needed to throw up because this is the number one problem I have been working on for 9 years. 9 years ago, when I was in year 12, or matric for my South African baddies, I was gunning for the best ATAR I could get, which is that big number you get at the end of the year that you think is your entire worth. I am absolutely slaughtering myself every day at school and then going home exhausted, trying to study at home, and then on the weekends going to the library for 10 hours per day, spending my parents' hard-earned money on the library vending machine. And it's because I had this preconceived idea that hard work was synonymous with how much time I spent doing the task, i.e. studying. Then comes this kid who was the top 1% of the entire state for academics. And this guy literally is out every Friday night getting halal snack pack with the boys, going beach and Maccas on Saturday, playing footy every Sunday. Honestly, I thought this man must have a deal with the devil to get the marks he did, and it looks like he's never working. When I asked him about his dealings with the devil, he told me something so simple. When I study, I study. When I'm out, I'm out. What I realized then is that I went to the library for 10 hours, but I would only get 2 hours of actual work done in that time. One, because I gave myself 10 hours to do as many tasks, so that's how long it took. And two, I spent so much time doing what I was already good at, studying what I already knew, because it felt so accomplishing in the moment. Meanwhile, Mr. No Deal with the Devil would go to the library for 2 hours, get done the same amount of work as I did in 10 hours, and then have 8 hours to go kebab shop with the boys. What's important in this demonstration is not the kebab shop. It is that being distracted is not the problem. Low quality work is not the problem. Discipline is not the problem. It's just actually working hard. And that prompted this pre-lab today and the lab next week, where we explore what it means to work hard and to work smart using psychology evidence. Today we examine a hypothesis, not a rule, but a claim that 10,000 hours of practice reliably predicts expert level performance. If you have been anywhere near the self-help section of Spotify or listened to a podcast called Ass-Breaking Motivation, it's all in capital letters, then you will have heard this rule, that it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. For those of you, like me, who count how many hours of sleep you're going to get before you fall asleep, 10,000 hours is equivalent to 416.6 recurring days. If you did anything, for 40 hours a week, every week, it would take you 4.8 years, no annual leave, to complete your 10,000 hours. So it's around 5 years of full-time doing what you're doing for you to reach expert level. The hypothesis is roughly 10,000 hours of practice reliably predicts expert level skill. This idea is everywhere. Sports, music, business, self-improvement culture, the notice board in my old share house as well. And when testing our hypothesis, we need to understand what these variables are. The variables for our hypothesis are practice and expertise. Variable 1, deliberate practice, involves effortful engagement, clearly defined performance goals, immediate or informative feedback, and repeated exposure to error. Variable 2, expertise. In this framework, it's not a single trait because it goes across so many domains, but it's basically an outcome shaped by learning history, biological constraints, motivation, and environment. Basically, if you wanted to be a professional ballerina and you, like me, are 4'0", then you have biological constraints, okay? Here's a short story. to demonstrate practice versus repetition. Very important. This is what I got wrong, spending 10 hours and $100 million at the library in year 12. The most talented musician I know has accolades that people 20 years older than him have on their vision boards. And luckily for us, he's also really open about sharing his experiences. And I asked him once why he was so much better than everyone else in his very competitive industry and very competitive course. And he told me, I only practice what I'm not good at. I only practice what I'm not good at. I said it twice. That's how important it is. If you are any type of performer, musician, creative, athlete, it could be really easy to do what I have done with my guitar or my piano for years now, and that's practice only what you're good at. It feels good, you feel competent, you find enjoyment in executing that task, and there's like fluency and fluidity, but that is not what psychology calls practice. That is what psychology and also everyone else calls repetition. So if what I do when I sit down with my instruments is repetition, then what my guitar, violin, piano, voice prodigy friend does is called deliberate practice. Now, with our hypothesis clear, our variables defined, our waist snatched, let's test this hypothesis. We begin with the origins of where this 10,000 hour figure actually came from, and it never originated as a rule. It emerged as a descriptive observation from psychological testing. Our big dogs in this expertise research field are Erickson, 2 S's, Cramp with a K, and Czech Roma with a hyphen and an umlaut on the O. And I can promise you that every single one of them gave the name Sam when they ordered coffee. Anyways, early expertise research in 1993 examined elite performers and asked them how long they had trained before reaching the very top of their domain. What the researchers found was an average, not a minimum, not a threshold, just an average of what these people self-reported. It's not like they logged every single hour since they were a child. It was just a self-reported number, and this 10,000 figure was an average. Even in the original data sets, there was substantial variation. Some individuals reached elite levels with fewer hours, others required far more than 10,000. The number was never intended to predict individual outcomes. What began as an empirical observation fell into the hands of ass-breaking motivation and the like, and suddenly 10,000 hours became a finish line, and people are left thinking that at the end of this finish line is a guaranteed expertise, and it's not. The first part of our hypothesis is disproved. 10,000 hours is not a reliable predictor for expertise level skill. This led me to ask, is the key difference then how you spend your hours? Not how many hours, but how you spend your hours. Is it because some people spend time in repetition and not deliberate practice? And also, what criteria do your hours have to meet to become deliberate practice? The research on deliberate practice was so well condensed into 2 very large meta-analyses. McNamara and colleagues conducted these meta-analyses of practice across multiple domains: music, games, sport, education, professions. And what they found was consistent but uncomfortable and not good news for our hypothesis. Practice does explain a meaningful but limited portion of performance differences. This basically means that a significant amount of performance outcomes, yes, is attributed to practice, but the effect varies by domain. So it's larger in structured activities, music, chess. It's smaller in dynamic, unpredictable domains like business or professions. This doesn't mean practice is not important. It means it's insufficient as a single explanatory variable. We cannot say that practice equals expertise. Our hypothesis weakens even more when we treat practice or skill as an equal sign or as a stopwatch. Now, this is a harsh reality check, so if you have a weak stomach or thin skin, skip the next 30 seconds, go chase your dreams, babe. But individual differences, environment, predisposition, these are all factors which can impact skill and expertise more than practice alone. So let's just bear that in mind when we're going through deliberate practice. Like I mentioned before, if your dream is to be a professional ballerina, you could put in the same deliberate practice as someone else who does their 10,000 hours, you do your 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. But if you are 4'3" with inflexible feet, then someone else who is more biologically predispositioned, their skill acquisition is going to be higher than yours, even if you put in the same deliberate practice. So things like that do matter. However, we must take these findings with a grain of salt. A really great study by our big dog Ericsson with 2 S's in 2019 explained that one reason effect sizes are smaller than expected lies in how practice is measured in these studies. Most of these studies rely on retrospective self-report. So essentially people are estimating how much they practiced rather than logging it experimentally. More importantly, time-based measures collapse radically different activities into a single number. 1 hour of ballet practice is not the same as 1 hour of business development calling. In these studies, 10 hours of repetition is treated as equivalent to 10 hours of structured, feedback-rich, error-driven practice. They're not equivalent. And luckily for us, Ericsson with 2 S's knew that. To dive deeper into this understanding of why hours in these studies fail as an explanation, we have to open the concept of practice itself, because like we mentioned, repetition for hours is not equivalent to deliberate practice for hours. Deliberate practice is not repetition, it is learning architecture. Tell me that isn't the sexiest thing you've ever heard. If I had a Spanish accent, it would be over for you. Deliberate practice, it is not a repetition, it's a learning architecture. That's crazy. Anyways, at its core, deliberate practice systematically violates what the brain prefers. That sounds disgusting, but also so true. Our brains prefer automation. Deliberate practice resists automation. It forces neuroplasticity. It forces your brain to refine neural pathways, which is not a comfortable process to go through. It was exactly like me sitting at the piano for an hour playing the same song I've played 1,000 times perfectly. My brain eats that up, Deliberate practice is my friend who sits at the piano for an hour doing everything he isn't good at. Psychologically, deliberate practice has several defining properties, and we're going to go through these with an example. I did one twerk class 5 years ago, and I've been waiting to bring it up in any context, to be honest, so I'm going to use it as the example for deliberate practice. And when I say Partition by Beyonce, I mean Okay, now that we got that, the first defining property of deliberate practice is task decomposition. Complex skills, such as twerking to Partition by Beyonce, are broken into components practiced in isolation, often stripped of their context. So this is breaking down the hip movements, working on sequences slowly and without the music in blocks or sections. This is insufficient for performance, but it is effective and efficient for learning. So for creating those neural pathways that create neuroplasticity and form skill acquisition. Our second defining property is called error amplification. Rather than minimizing mistakes, deliberate practice exposes them. So in that twerk class, if we're going through a dance sequence and the class just cannot get the ka da boo, instead of breezing over it, the teacher will run that section back again and again until everyone gets it and then join it back into the larger sequence. In deliberate practice, errors are the signal for where the effort needs to flow. Our third defining property is immediate or diagnostic feedback. Feedback specifies why performance deviated from the target and how to correct it. It's literally just feedback. This is the dance teacher saying, you're shaking your ass, but the accent is on the down, not the up. Anyone who does dance is like, yeah, the accent is on boo, not the ka. You know what I mean? Fourth, sustained cognitive effort. Deliberate practice operates at the edge of current ability. Believe it or not, twerk classes in Perth actually split across ability levels. If you have never twerked in your life before, you go to the beginner's class because that's the edge of your ability. You wouldn't go to the advanced class unless you were feeling competent in the intermediate class. We've spoken about this edge of current ability in previous episodes, and it will be a big part of our lab next week. At the edge of current ability, tasks approach working memory limits. Your error rates increase and mental fatigue accumulates. These are the reasons why elite performers rarely exceed 3 to 5 hours per day of true deliberate practice. So tell me why. I was at the library for 10 hours when I could have been at the kebab shop with the boys. This effort, deliberate practice, is not motivationally neutral. It's associated with feelings of frustration. It's associated with reduced enjoyment during practice and a high risk of disengagement without external structure. Deliberate practice is rare, not because people lack discipline, but because the cognitive cost is so real, and maybe they haven't set up the external structure, the learning architecture, that prevents us from disengagement. So those are the defining properties that separate practice, repetition, from deliberate practice, which is going to be really important for our experiment later in the lab. But first, let's run it back to our original hypothesis that 10,000 hours of practice reliably predict expertise. We disproved that 10,000 hours has any bearing other than a rough estimate self-reported by people. We disproved that practice itself is not a single predictor for expertise in every domain. We then importantly distinguished between repetition and deliberate practice and dived into why deliberate practice is a rarity. Now we move to revising our hypothesis. Our new hypothesis is that deliberate practice reliably predicts significant improvement across domains. Deliberate practice reliably predicts significant improvement across domains. This is where you come in, because this is our experiment for today's pre-lab. The experiment is the part of the episode where I give you something tangible to work with based on the dissections we've done in the lab so far. Today, we are going to take a task or skill for the next week and dedicate 30 minutes of deliberate practice to it each day. If you want to, comment in the comment section what skill you're choosing, and next week we'll come back and discuss how you feel about it, how the actual deliberate practice felt, and if you saw improvement in those very short hours, because that's 3.5 hours in total. And then we're going to see how we can apply this principle and this process to the rest of your life and find out if you're actually working hard or if you're just spending your time in repetition. During this experiment, when you're spending your 30 minutes a day in your deliberate practice, I want you to remember this. Deliberate practice feels uncomfortable. It feels difficult and like a struggle. Ease is misinterpreted by the brain as mastery. Difficulty is misinterpreted as failure. Both of these judgments are unreliable because difficulty during practice is often a marker for deeper processing. Once you choose the skill or the task that you're going to use for this experiment for the week ahead, I want you to break it down and check if... break it down. Oh, do you get it? Because we were talking about the dancing class. Okay, I want you to break it down into those 4 defining properties. Have you taken that complex skill or task and broken it down into task decomposition? Have you practiced them in isolation? Have you stripped them of their context? Have you taken them, made them slower, practiced them without the performative aspect? Second, error amplification. Have you brushed over the mistakes, or have you really zoned in on the errors because that's where your effort needs to flow? Have you got immediate or diagnostic feedback? Have you got feedback from yourself saying, oh, this is not how the task is meant to go? Have you got Duolingo telling you, bow, bow, that wasn't correct? Are you getting that feedback immediately? And lastly, Is it a sustained cognitive effort? Are you operating your practice at the edge of your current ability? Do you feel sometimes frustrated or like you're not quite getting it? These are the 4 defining properties of every single practice that we are having in these next 7 days. The task that I'm going to be choosing is sight reading. Like I told you guys last time, I really want to get better at my sight reading, and the only way that I can get better is with deliberate practice. And so that is a skill that I'm going to be practicing for the next 7 days, half an hour each day. If there is someone that you would like to send this podcast to, I'm not going to object. That would be kind of cool and also free marketing for me. But seriously, if there's someone who you thought of during this podcast, make sure to send them the link, and I will see you all next week in the lab. Don't be late.